First of all, I want to get away from the dictionary definition of a constitution. A constitution must have purpose, and the purpose must be to create a nation that conduces to the greatest happiness of the greatest number of people. That is what a constitution must be. And having set the objective of the constitution, you then frame a constitution to achieve that objective.
Because we really do have a race problem. Those divisions are real. We see it in our politics, we see it in our trade union. We see that they take the divisions with them. Look at where people live in this US. You have enclaves in the Bronx and in Richmond Hill and in Brooklyn. They're taking the division with them.
Women are dying in the streets, and we have a government pontificating running around campaigning for women's vote. No women should vote in this election coming up unless there is something done to the legislation as Magistrate Kim is advocating.
That voices like ours that are not in the political trench fighting it out, voices like ours should become stronger. One of the things about the Caribbean is that we have never had one discourse. Bass will know the days of the New World and the Old World and the radical left and so on. What we had was this concourse of ideas, which I think in the early days of independence pushed us in a certain direction. We've got to move back to that point of having these multiple discourses.
Good night, viewers in Guyana. Good night, viewers in the United States, and good night, viewers from around the world. We want to welcome you to this weekly talk show where we bring personnel, actors to hammer out issues that's out playing out in the streets of Guyana. This program, of course, brings all sides together. So we can discuss and we can find ways of making Guyana a better place. We want to give a special thanks to Globespan 24/7 and his team, Mr. Nohar Singh, Devin, and Kumar, for putting these programs together. It's certainly what we need: a lot more dialogue, a lot more discussion, and a lot more views from all directions to ensure that we can fully understand the issue and we can have a lot more informed decision making. Over the past 6-7 months of this show, we've had over 1 million viewers from the US and Canada and Guyana and other parts of the world. Again, we want to thank Globespan 24/7 for this special effort. Today we'll be talking about election. No surprise at all. And with election comes a whole host of subjects, and we'll be discussing that with our team today. So we're going to be talking about elections, whether we are ready or we are not. You know, if you ask the Constitution if we are ready for election, the Constitution says absolutely we are ready. If you ask the government, they're probably going to say no, we are not. If you ask the opposition, they're going to say, yes, we are ready, and we want to go. If you ask the man in the street, are you ready for election? I think for sure the views are going to be as wide as they are Guyanese and as wide as they are rivers in Guyana. With me, we have 3 special guests, no stranger to you, our audiences, whether in Guyana or out of Guyana. We have Mr. Raf Ramkaran, former executive member of the PPP, former Speaker of the Parliament. He was a former GECOM commissioner, so his role in this discussion today is going to be extremely useful for us. And of course, one of the leaders of a new and united Guyana, a new political party contesting the imminent elections. Also with us is Bishop Juan Edgehill, PPP executive member, a former member of and I think he is still a member of Parliament, and also a junior minister of finance. And with us also is Mr. Kemaraj Ramjatan, Minister of Security and Chairman of the Alliance for Change. Will be Mr. Kemaraj and rest of the team. Are you guys? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Really?
Yes, I am on.
Kemaraj, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you. I'm on phone here.
Oh,
Thanks
excellent, excellent. Well, welcome, gentlemen, and I look forward to a very informed discussion this evening. Please let's bear in mind that we have limited time for every speaker. So when a question is asked or a view is asked, please be as concise as possible. Get to the point. We want to make sure that we can give everyone equal time on air today. My first question would be to Mr. Kemaraj Ramjatan today, and then of course my other guests can follow up on it. Based on the CCJ ruling of the on the Guyana Constitution and what it means as it relates to the no confidence vote, the government must resign and set in motion the process for election within 90 days. This should have been done since December 21st, according to the CCJ, and today we would have been in a post-election period. Wanted to ask you, as one of our guests that's in government, where are we on this, and what can Guyanese expect in the coming days in terms of the government complying with that ruling?
Well, Salam, the government is doing everything to comply with the order in relation to the elections being held in accordance with their consequential orders made a couple of days ago. One of the most important things that we have to now get accomplished is the appointment of an elections commission chairman. That process is going on. I understand talks were held between the leader of the opposition's representative this afternoon, and that is going on. I understand 4 names have been held not unacceptable to the president, and the president's suggested names of 2 persons were held not to be acceptable to the leader of the opposition. He has now put in 4 other names to ensure that we get the 6 names that are not going to be unacceptable to the president. So that is a process going on. That is an especially important appointment because, quite frankly, a whole lot of what may be regarded as thereafter as consequences will follow. The chairman will then go and indicate to his other commissioners as to the state of readiness of the process for elections. And I think that is where we're going to have some problems. I do not believe that if you were to so construe the consequential order that the CCJ made any ruling that elections must be held on or before the 18th. They realized the complications that were set in as a result of the number of court matters that we had right up to the CCJ, and they indicated in very exhortational suggestions that we do abide by the Constitution and all political actors.
And Minister Kemaraj, and I know you would have gone that direction, but I think the bulk of the viewers and commentators on looking at the government, I think the issue is the willingness to comply. And I think that's where my question is trying to direct.
Absolute willingness on our part, Salim. Absolute. Only this afternoon we were dealing with what caretaker government means, and we have gotten guidelines from the same Canadian textbook writer. We have gone into that aspect of it to instruct literally a number of, well, now when we're going to finalize that, to instruct our ministers as to what that means and so on. We now have to await the readiness for elections as early as possible. And that is why, although the PPP asked for consequential orders that were going to be literally coercive to the extent of asking the court for a date, the court realized the complications after reading the submissions from GECOM and so on. And that is why the big issue now might be, it must be held on or before the 18th of September. But to get the paraphernalia for running an election will be a difficult thing, much less the list.
Well, so let me ask. Let's ask our PUP representative on this show here today. Minister Kamaraj is saying that there is absolute willingness to comply with the Constitution. Are you sensing that from President Granger and from other political leaders in Guyana?
Well, Salim, let me first of all say good night to all of our viewers and to make a slight correction to the way you introduced me. I am not an executive member of the People's Progressive Party. I'm a member of the People's Progressive Party Civic Parliamentary Group. I'm from the civic component. So I thought I needed to correct that so that no one would think that I'm speaking on behalf of the executive of the PPP. But as a member of the parliamentary opposition, and I would think a member that is quite involved, I can say up front, the CCJ did not make suggestions, and Mr. Kamaraj Ramzatan is a lawyer. The CCJ ruled. A suggestion is if you can do it, do it. When you obey the Constitution, you're not doing Guyanese a favor. You're doing what is expected of you. And the Granger administration has bought themselves 7 months using spurious arguments. First of all, it was mathematics. 34 versus 33. Now it seems to be English. We have changed the subject, but the positioning remains the same. Let's see if we can play around words. Let's see if we can play around meanings. And it is what you call kerfuffling the minds of people. There has not been one single clear statement followed by action that says the Granger-led administration, which is now a caretaker government, will comply with Articles 106.6 and 106.7 of the Constitution. They keep using now GECOM and GECOM's readiness or not being ready as an excuse to hang on desperately in government. I remember, and all of us saw it, the day when Mr. Marcus, senior counsel, said to the 5 judges sitting there that the earliest GECOM could be ready was December 25th. Justice Saunders held up the Constitution and says, what do you want me to do with this? Rewrite it? Justice Anderson said, so the people of Guyana will have a Christmas gift. When they ruled, they said the no confidence motion was validly passed on December 21st, 28. Because of the court hearings, it went on pause. We definitively ruled on June 18. Articles 106.6 and 106.7 is immediately engaged. They didn't need to put the date, you count it. It's immediately engaged. So this sand dancing and trying to find reasonable excuses and trying to use English and the meanings of words and trying to say, well, it didn't really mean this, it meant that, it's not going to stand. They said all the personages must operate with integrity. And integrity means you obey from a clear and clean conscience. You do everything within your power and stop making excuses. So I would not sit here tonight on this program and allow it to be another program for the making of excuses to hide the Granger administration from obeying the Constitution. They must be called out for what they're doing, and that is seeking to buy themselves more time.
And Mr. Ramkaran, I know you are also a seasoned lawyer in Guyana, and the Constitution clearly states, and the CCJ reinforced it, that the government must resign and set in motion the process for election. Are you sensing that in Guyana? You're managing one of the smaller parties, and I'm quite sure you're eager to go to the polls to test your strength. Do you sense that the current administration is absolutely complying?
Well,
have they resigned? I mean that's one thing. Have they resigned?
Well, we don't know yet. I think the question of the resignation and resignation of the cabinet and so on, while important, are not the critical issues that we are facing. I think the critical issue today is the appointment of a chairman or chairperson of the Elections Commission. And I hope and I expect that if we intend to abide by the ruling of the CCJ and by the Article 106 of the Constitution, then we need to get that chairperson in place by the end of this week. I hope the discussions are successful. I'm glad to see that they're finally taking place on a regular basis. And I hope that we attend the week with a chairperson of the Elections Commission in place. Once that is done, we need to follow the guidance given by the Caribbean Court of Justice, which the government said it would. And what is that guidance? That the political actors, including GECOM, they specifically mentioned GECOM, must follow the Constitution. And they must follow Article 106. They said Article 106 is simple, it needs no explanation. So the government and GECOM and any other political actor must comply with Article 106 of the Constitution. This is not a question of willingness and not willingness. This is not a question of whether you wish to comply. This is a question of you are obliged to comply. Now, if the government does not and GECOM do not comply with the ruling of the CCJ that the political actors must comply with Article 106 of the Constitution, then we are in no man's land. We are in constitutional no man's land. The government spokespersons, including Kamraj, point out to the fact that the list is problematical. Well, the three house-to-house registrations we've had in the past, in the 90s, early 90s, 90 to 92, in 1997, and in 2006, all took 18 months or more. Now, the 2006 elections, the actual house-to-house was 6 months, I think January to July. But the preparation of the list thereafter, inputting in computerization and so on, took 15 months. As a matter of fact, on the 15th month was when the GECOM finally received the report on duplicates in the list. So the list was not completed until 15 months. It would have taken a few more months to be compiled and
if I can,
through the claims and objections period.
If I can steer the discussion back to, and you brought it up, you talked about the appointment of a chairman for GECOM, and in fact that was one of the violation of Granger himself, President Granger. One of his violations was to unilaterally appoint a chairman. Now we're in today. He is now nominating members to the opposition for GECOM chairmanship. Again, does this make any kind of sense? He was admonished by the CCJ for that. Yet he's backtracking again and saying, "Hey, I've got some names here. I would like to nominate for GECOM." Does this make sense to you, or for Guyana, or even for politics?
One of the judges said the final list of 6 not unacceptable names must come from the leader of the opposition. The Constitution hasn't been changed. That is what it says. But during the course of the discussions in court, one of the judges said, look, the leader of the opposition and the president must sit down and discuss names and come up with 6 names which the president can live with. Now, there's nothing wrong during that process for the president to suggest a name or 2 names or more names. That is all that was said. I don't know if the president feels that that was some kind of ruling giving him authority to submit names to the leader of the opposition. But that was not what is meant. Yeah. What was meant that during the course of a discussion, there's nothing wrong with things being submitted by the president. But that is not the main issue. The main issue, in my view, is we need to have a chairperson, and they need to work diligently every day.
And Minister Kimraj, and I know you mentioned earlier that you're absolutely complying, your government is absolutely complying with the CCJ rulings. And now at the 11th hour that we are searching for a GECOM chairman, does it make sense for the president to further delay the process by trying to get some of these nominees in the list?
We must learn to understand what the decision of the CCJ in relation to the Zulfikar matter is. 6 names not unacceptable to the president must be submitted by the leader of the opposition to the president. How would the leader of the opposition know whether those names are not unacceptable to the president? And in finding out that, the court ruled by a majority decision, not a majority, a consensus was brought by all the judges, because the decision of the president of the CCJ was that this is how you go about it. The 2 of them must sit down and communicate and hammer it out. And in the hammering out process, it will be necessary for the leader of the opposition to suggest his names, and the president can also suggest names so that they could have, at the end of the day, 6 names that will then be submitted. Remember, it's only one time that the leader of opposition will get to submit the 6 that is not unacceptable to the president. So the president can suggest names, the leader of the opposition can suggest names. The president is not submitting names as per the Constitution. A lot of people are conflating that submission of the 6 final names that are not unacceptable to the president as being with suggestions of names. But because you have to have a convergence of both the leader of the opposition and the president finding acceptability of the 6, from which the president will select one, you have this hammering out process. So when people are saying that you cannot suggest on the part of the president, he cannot suggest names, that is not in accordance with the consensualist approach that the court moved to. The court knew the evolution of it, it was unilateralist. One person, the president, makes the point. Now the court brought in the leader of the opposition, but the court did not rule that
the Constitution always said the leader of the opposition. It wasn't the court.
No, please.
Says that.
But how the hammering out process? Well, there is where there is absolutely a misconception by very many people that only the leader of the opposition can submit names. I can submit names, meaning prior to the formal submission. Prior to the formal submission, I would wish to say that all parties here, the 2 of them, can suggest names before they get to the formal submission of the 6. And even when the 6 is now submitted and the president does not find acceptability with them, okay, if it's 6 names, he can give reasons why he does not like the list of 6, individually giving reasons. The reasons were not for the suggestion of names like we had in the period, that 2-day thing that we had there. No, it is important that this be understood, that the president can suggest names too. How then is it consensualist when only one party will suggest names before you get to the final submission of the six? And that is not being understood by even the lawyers on the other side and other places.
Bishop, I want to bring you in here.
I need to come in here because...
Is it practical at the 11th hour to go through all of this, longer period of finding out who and what and where when the clock is ticking?
Salim and viewers, this matter is not a complicated matter. The Constitution is quite clear that the leader of the opposition needs to consult with all non-governmental parliamentary parties to come up with 6 names that are not unacceptable to the president. The CCJ said the use of the double negative, not unacceptable. It simply means that the president can refuse someone just because the person would not have been someone he suggested or would like. The use of the double negative suggests. So the not unacceptable doesn't mean that the person have to be a choice of the president. It must be a choice that came from a consultative process with the leader of the opposition and the non-governmental parliamentary parties. The CCJ, in dealing with the issue of the president acting in a unilateral manner and setting criteria outside of the Constitution, gives some guidelines of how you could probably develop a list that is not unacceptable. And it says the leader of the opposition and the president must communicate in good faith and perhaps meet. The good faith had to do with the exchange of correspondence and all the rest of it, and perhaps meet. We've been all of that. But what we ended up with, when we went to the process to start the informal process, Kemraj was a part of that team. Even before we even started examining the 11 names, which was appropriately adjusted and submitted to the president for examination, the president's representatives placed before us 8 names. And the whole world knows now those 8 names included persons who were highly politically connected. So I said at that day, is this for discussion or is it for provocation? Because if you come to discuss 11 names that was appropriately adjusted, some of the persons who ended up being involved in the case of the CCJ were eliminated, other persons said they were not interested. We were supposed to be discussing which of these names are not unacceptable to the president. But then we get 8 names, and the intent was for us to join the 8 names to the 11 names that the leader of the opposition had submitted. We put them in one bag, so we start considering a pick from 18. We refused. And that is where the story went. Kemraj seems to be advocating that the court ruled that the consensus mechanism that needs to be used was as a result of some fault of the leader of the opposition. It was the president who acted unilaterally that caused this case to end up at the CCJ. The pronouncements was what the president cannot do. He cannot unilaterally appoint a GECOM chairman once the leader of the opposition is engaged in the process. This whole thing about reverting to the proviso where you could unilaterally appoint has been threatened and has been floated, that if you don't get a list that the leader of that the president is acceptable, we could go back to that. The court has already ruled that once the leader of the opposition is engaged, so what we have now is political gamesmanship coming from hardcore political actors saying, if we got to get an informal decision, you must get 4, we must get 2, you must get 5, we must get 1. The whole world is saying it's a transparent ploy. If the president suggests a name to go on the list, it's a unilateral appointment. Because if you agree and put that name on the list, that's the person he will appoint. So it's just like if he didn't wait on the leader of the opposition to give him a list. He just decided on this person. He says, if you want your list to go ahead, put on this person. And when you put on that person, that's the person who becomes GECOM's chairman. That is unilateralism, and Kemraj, as a well-respected lawyer in Guyana, should not be representing and defending such a position.
Bishop, I want to ask you a straightforward question. And would the PPP accept any of the president's nominees?
The leader of the opposition has already indicated that he does not have an adverse position, or he's not averse, I should say, to suggestions coming from the president. But his constitutional right must remain intact. The final decision is a submission coming from him. So if the president throws up a name or suggests a name that is a respectable, impartial, fair-minded, objective Guyanese, we will not reject such a person.
That is exactly the position, Salim, that if we have those names that the president will find not unacceptable in a list of 6, certainly the list will not be thrown out. But you see, this is where we are getting this fundamental error, because indeed the leader of the opposition has the right to deliver to the president 6 names not unacceptable to the president. What it means is the convergence of acceptability of both.
Who said that? Kemraj, who said that, and where was it said?
At paragraph 28 of the decision and 26 of the decision of Zulfikar. This is what it says. Could I please read it? It's not very long, Salim.
Go right ahead.
Good, right. This is it. What is not so clear is the process that should be followed to accommodate the spirit of this consensus that must prevail between the president and the leader of the opposition. The Constitution envisages that the process will culminate in a list of 6 names being presented to the president, none of whom is unacceptable to the president. This ultimately gives the president the opportunity to select any one of those 6 as chairman. The question is, how do these 2 constitutional actors interact with each other so as to arrive at that culmination? We are of the view that the most sensible approach is that before a list is submitted, the leader of the opposition and the president must communicate with each other in good faith and perhaps meet to discuss eligible candidates for the position of the chairman. The aim of these discussions must be to agree the names of 6 persons who fit the stated eligibility requirements and who are not unacceptable to the president. That is what that says. Yes, what could that mean? But you have to go and trash it out like we negotiate when we are coming to a settlement in a court matter. You have suggestions, the other side have suggestions. What you are going to say, if it is only the leader of the opposition, is now the leader of the opposition will be unilateralist.
That is fine. When 2 rational people sit down, we didn't need the CCJ to tell us that. When 2 rational people sit down to discuss something, suggestions come from both sides. In Guyana, the 2 political parties are not rational. So rational decisions do not come from both sides. We need an independent body like the CCJ to tell us that Mr. Jagdeo and Mr. Granger sit down over coffee or tea and discuss names, and one person says, what about this person? Another one says, what about that person?
That's right.
That is how normal people behave.
And that is what we want.
Guyana is not normal. And it is wrong for you, out of that passage, to elevate a principle out, to extract and elevate out of that a principle that the president has a right, a formal right to nominate names. The passage didn't say that, and that is not what the CCJ meant.
Well, I differ with you, and that is the end of that. We need not go on like irrational persons. You have an opinion, I have mine, and I have the decision in front of me.
No, you see, if I could just say this quickly, I agree with Mr. Ramkaran's position of how things should go. But one of the things I need to say, the CCJ did not change the Constitution. It is still the leader of the opposition who has to submit those 6 names.
Correct. And
it's still the president who has to select one.
That's right.
And nothing will change that. The CCJ is not empowered to rewrite the Constitution, to amend the Constitution, or change the Constitution. The CCJ gives some guidelines of how you can probably get to that. But the bottom line is the leader of the opposition still has a constitutional responsibility to submit the list. And where we are right now is that we haven't gone to the formal process. The formal process will begin when the president writes the leader of the opposition and says, there's a vacancy for GECOM's chairman. I need your list of 6 names. All that is taking place at this particular time is the informal discussions. And I agree with Mr. Ramkaran. If this caretaker government, this Granger-led administration, wants to behave properly and say to the people of Guyana, I will obey the Constitution, a benchmark is a GECOM chairman before the end of the week.
Right. Viewers, if I can interject here, guys. Viewers, you're listening to a live program on Globespan 24/7. We want to thank Nohar Singh and his team, Kumar and Kevin, who are working diligently every week to get this program to you and to get the views from all sides. If you have a question, please let us know. You can type your questions in a comment area, and we will get it to you. If you want to make a call, of course, the numbers are posted. This is a discussion that will look at your questions. So please interact as much as possible. So this brings me to my next question. And of course, like everything else that we've been discussing, everything has a timeline. Do we have a timeline on the selection of the GECOM chairmanship? Kamraj, do you sense?
I do.
As part of compliance with the Constitution and the CCJ ruling, is there a timeline for this? Is it next week, next month?
I am hoping that probably tomorrow or the next day. And if indeed the 6 names do not find acceptability with the president, and it's 6 names that have to be finding acceptability with him, the president has every right to go, because of the Constitution was never amended, the proviso was never deleted. So the president can then go on, if he's not satisfied with the names, to proceed to appoint his person.
You see, that is the constitutional heresy that is being
that is what's
here. That's constitutional heresy, because the fact of the matter is, the president then could always say, I don't find any names.
Gentlemen, another time, please.
I'm going to go unilateral. That is why we ended up at the CCJ. It's the exact same mentality and behavior, that I don't have to accept the names from the leader of the opposition if I'm not getting my person, and I could go unilaterally. That is what this case and ruling is all about.
The president is excluded from that power. Did the CCJ delete that proviso in its interpretation?
But once the leader of the opposition is engaged, it says you can go.
If you send the 6 names and he doesn't find favor with the 6 names, he has what we did not produce the first time, duty to give 6 reasons why. And that can be given, and that he can then go on to the proviso.
Well, maybe Mr. Kemraj Ramdatan is telegraphing to the world the intent of this government, how they intend to operate on this matter. Mr. Ramdatan was telegraphing to the world.
Can we give Mr. Ramkaran an opportunity to express his views?
Because of this quarrel that's going on, which will never end, while these 2 political parties...
When you were in the PPP, you did exactly the same. What you're talking about?
Mr. Kemraj, let the guest speak, please.
Well, all of a sudden, you're saying that you never used to quarrel?
Minister Kemraj, please.
Go on, sorry.
You're bullying me?
I'm not bullying you, but I am trying to correct a historical thing that you're talking about. When you were in the PPP, I was with you in a case of similar nature, and you used to fight the PNC? You're giving an impression that you stop fighting when you're at UNOG now? You will fight both PNC and the APNU AFC.
I have learned.
Sorry, the PPP.
Mr. Ramkaran, the minister just mentioned that if the names are not acceptable to the president, he is willing to do what he might have done in the past.
That is a possibility.
That's a possibility. Do you agree with that?
Mr. Ramzatan is here to intimidate and bully me, the Reverend, and the people of Guyana. That's what he's here to do. He's here to threaten and bully. That's what he's doing. He's threatening
all right. My apologies, Ralph. Go ahead.
Rational people. If you have rational people who will sit down, discuss, and follow the guidance that the CCJ gave, I don't think we needed the guidance of the CCJ. But if we follow the guidance of the CCJ, the issue of proviso will not and will never arise. And during my time in the PPP, this issue never arose. These issues about appointing the chairman of an elections commission never arose. There were no such problems.
There were problems. That is what caused the Carter Center to work out this rule. PPP was always fighting that constitution.
Are you living on Mars? This was
man. You're saying you have to fight. We fought. Me and you fought.
Followers of the chairman. Are you living on Mars?
Mr. Ramkaran, Minister Kemara just mentioned that he sees that a chairman can be found and selected within the next 2 to 3 days. Do you see that as a possibility? Can we have a chairman in such a short time?
If prevails, a chairman can be found and appointed before the weekend. And that is what Guyana needs. Unless that happens, we will be in very great difficulty.
What stumbling blocks do you see for it not to happen by this weekend?
Well, I don't. If both political parties want somebody that they have 100% trust in, it will not happen. There's no such person in Guyana. Both parties have to compromise that, okay, we think this is a reasonable person for both of us, for both sides. We have some confidence, but not full confidence. Each one must think so of the person who is nominated. You can't have a person in whom you have 100% confidence. And if you want to find such a person, that person doesn't exist. Because if one party has 100% confidence in a person, the other party will have none. You have to find a person in which both parties have a degree of confidence. And many of those people exist.
Bishop, I want to bring you in on this other question. Now, let's say by this weekend we find a chairman for the Elections Commission. What's the next hurdle? What do we have to clear to get to election day?
The list. The issue of the list, because the drumbeat of Congress Place is no house-to-house registration, no elections. Mr. Ramkaran has indicated to you that the length of time you take to get a list when you go to house registration. And as a matter of fact, the United Nations Technical Assessment Mission came to Guyana to assess what support Guyana needs for elections 2020. There was no confidence motion tabled or passed at the time. And in their report, they indicated getting a new list is not likely to have greater acceptability than what currently obtains. This is the United Nations Technical Assessment Team that came here and they wrote it in their report. This thing about getting a list and a GECOM chairman are the two cards that the dug-in hardliners in the APNU AFC who don't want to face an election have decided to use. The bottom line is, if there was any reasonable or rational behavior, the no confidence motion was passed on December 21st. The election should have been held no later than March 21st. The CCJ in its ruling says elections should have been held by March 21st. That is not subject to interpretation. The CCJ said that. So what should be done? The list that election would have been held on was that list whose validity came to an end on April 30th. What needs to be done? That list needs to become the preliminary voters list. We go to a claims and objections period, probably for a month or 6 weeks. The dead people must come off the list. All the people who are not registered get registered. People who have been transferred from one division to the next division, and we get a revised voters list that eventually puts us to an official list of electors for an election. But all of the excuses that the PNC and the APNU and the AFC have been making that young people are going to be left off the list could be corrected during a claims and objections period. All the excuses about who is on the list that should not be on the list, that could be dealt with during a claims and objections period. But like on this program, one of your guests, Mr. David Hines, let the cat out of the bag when he said, look, the PNC looked at this list and they don't believe they could win any elections with the list. And that's the problem. So the next issue you will have, if you get a GECOM chair by the end of this week, is the fighting now at GECOM about the list. And the pressure would be under that neutral, impartial, fair-minded chairman to give the casting vote. And that is why Kemraj and his group don't want the selection from this consensual process. They want a provocation where you could have a unilateral appointment coming from the president, somebody who the president could give instructions to, like what was happening at GECOM with Patterson. That is the only reason why they put back Patterson on the list as a suggestion. Their whole intent was shown. But we were able to move that along, and we're getting somewhere now. I hope we can get that.
Minister Ramjatan, is a claims and objection period adequate, or would that be comfortable for the APNU AFC government?
A claims and objection period that we are saying now, Salim, is not going to be, in our opinion, the best way. It's house to house. However, since registration and the conduct of the elections is something that is totally GECOM, it is not the APNU AFC or the president or anybody. When that appointment is made, if that GECOM chairman says house to house, just like how the CCJ says 34 and not 33 and not 34, we respect it. Similarly, if that body, constitutional agency, says with a claims and objection period, we will have credible elections in Guyana, and it is 4-3, because I know how 3 members are voting for house to house there, fine, we will abide by that. And that is why it is important as the very first step that we get an GECOM chairman that is not unacceptable to the president, that can find convergence also. So it is simple. GECOM will determine that. GECOM and its chairman, the 7 people.
I might be wrong, but I'm not too sure I've ever heard GECOM saying that they need to do house-to-house registration. I think it has been
GECOM on several occasions, Salim, when we voted for that $3 billion on this year to hold house-to-house registration, GECOM was the one that advised us. They did that since 2016. Suraj Bali indicated that every 8 years there must be house-to-house. And in 2016, we were supposed to, because it happened in 2007, 2008. And in 2016, he indicated that, yes, we must have another house-to-house. We did not have the money then, the government, because we had to put...
You didn't give the money.
Well, we did not give the money because we had the sugar workers to bail out.
Oh, the sugar workers become the excuse.
Please.
The sugar workers become the excuse.
And what sugar workers? That is the truth. You yourself were telling us that we must give sugar workers what you want with house to house now, because the elections is still 2020.
We never said that.
You didn't know that Charandas was going to do that piece of mischief. You didn't know that? Well, give the money to the sugar workers. That happened in 2017. That happened in 2018.
All right, Mr. Ramkaran, we have a former commissioner of GECOM on the panel today, Mr. Ramkaran. Is there a need for house-to-house registration given the condition of the current list?
Well, let me ask the question, and that will answer itself. Suppose a new chairman or chairperson of GECOM is appointed, and the chairperson says we need a new house-to-house registration for a voters list. And that house-to-house registration will take us, doesn't matter when, I say 18 months, but GECOM has said December the 25th. That house-to-house registration takes us to December the 25th. Can I ask Kemaraj what happens then? Having regard to the fact that the leader of the opposition has said that he is not going to agree to an extension of the life of the parliament. Can I ask Kemaraj, tell me what happens then?
We have a crisis, but it is not at the hands of the government. If GECOM were to say that is what will make credible elections in Guyana, and we have to go that way, isn't it just like the judges of the CCJ making their orders? You want the president to overrule GECOM? We cannot. And that is where it will fall for a consensualist approach, and that is why the Constitution even gave the leader of the opposition and the political players an opportunity that we can go to extend the time for a further period.
No, but
the Constitution says elections has to be held in 3 months.
Yes,
it means any chairman and GECOM must obey the Constitution in finding a mechanism of having a credible list to conduct elections in the stipulated time frame.
Yes,
a government whose drumbeat is to delay elections as long as possible, where a president has also said he's going to have his full term, where Mr. Ramjatan and his colleagues are going around the country telling people, have a good Christmas, elections in 2020. GECOM ain't got a chairman yet, but you're already telling people that. It's because you intend to exert some pressure to ensure that the no confidence motion that was passed since 7 months ago is not followed, and the provisions of the Constitution is not followed, and GECOM is only your smoke screen and your excuse to desperately hang on to power. But when September 18 comes, your caretaker status is for 3 months. 3 months after September 18, your caretaker government comes to an end. Mr. Ramkaran, as a person who's worked in the Constitution, will tell you we could only have a situation where there's no parliament for 4 months.
You want
the solution to the convening of the new parliament, and that is to ensure that we don't have dictatorships in Guyana. We must have constitutional rule, and Mr. Ramjatan and his government must accept their caretaker status that will expire on September 18 and do everything within their power to ensure that Guyana is a country that has a constitutional democracy. Anything short of that is hypocrisy.
That is exactly what we will do.
With that, I want to say,
what we will do.
With that, I just want to say, you three panelists are incredibly awesome, because we have over 700 live viewers on Facebook and over 300 on YouTube. So I think you guys are doing a fantastic job. This is good. This is healthy. And I think Guyanese want to hear what's inside, so we can figure out how we can fix the outside. An impartial and neutral chairman goes a long way, but does not necessarily mean an impartial or neutral GECOM election machinery system. And I want to ask all three of you this, especially Mr. Ramkaran, who's from the inside. He was a commissioner in the past. What other steps would we need to see to avoid an impartial GECOM? Are we expecting to have maybe Carter Center play a bigger role in upcoming election? So the focus now is, can GECOM be impartial even with an agreed impartial chairman?
GECOM can be impartial. There are issues relating to the employment practices of GECOM. I'm aware of those issues. Those issues were there since 1991 when I became a member, and the issues remained in up to 2001 when I also was a member of the GECOM. But GECOM must make a greater effort, having regard to the critical position it holds in the democratic structure of Guyana. GECOM needs to make a greater effort. They have made no effort whatsoever, and that situation is defended, unfortunately. They should make a greater effort to have balanced employment personnel. But I think that GECOM, as it stands, can do an impartial job. It has done before, and there's no reason why it can't do so now.
Mr. Minister Ramjatan, do you believe that GECOM can deliver a neutral, impartial election coming up? It's a fear by many commentators, it's a fear by many on the streets that GECOM will be used to do so many things, including tingling with the elections.
I am certain that it will do a good job of it. We at the Alliance for Change level did make and could have proven, and we brought even a petition in relation to what GECOM and especially Mr. Boudou, I think it was, had done in relation to a Linden seat some time ago. And so you can have, but I believe that in relation to all that which was done over the past years with GECOM, especially after those allegations were made by the Alliance for Change, there have been new appointees. Look, in Guyana, no matter what, you are going to have people who are going to have this perception that because of a certain ethnicities dominating certain institutions, that you don't have justice. That is not true. I now am minister over the police force, the fire department, and the prisons. They're all Afro-Guyanese, or largely big percentages there. They do as best as possible to ensure professionalism. You will have your rogue elements and all of that. Okay? But it is some things that sometimes we have to start trusting our institutions. And once you have that independent chairman, and that is why I think the PPP also would like to have their chairman being one from the 6 that their president would find acceptability with, and so on. That is going to be a kind of a neutralizing effect in relation to whatever they might perceive as being things being done on the ground. And so we have to live with that. Even in America, where you come from, Salem, you would have that Chad thing in the Florida court with Al Gore and one of the Bushes. One big thing that went to the Supreme Court and had one big piece of litigation. When people do litigation in Guyana, however, they forget what the Western democracies do. And all manner of things. We are given as if we are in Jurassic Park still, as if we are dinosaurs. But please, we must appreciate that that's the institution under the Constitution. And indeed, just like how you would have at your Supreme Court level, the conservatives fighting the Democrats for Supreme Court judges, it's a similar fight that will happen here in relation to the GECOM chairman. And these things happen in all democracies. But we are suffering here as a government because it seems like only we are the rotten ones all over the place. In any event, to answer your questions, I believe it is going to happen.
No, Kimraj, we suffer because we violate the Constitution.
Oh gosh, and
the CCJ said so. The CCJ said we violated the Constitution on the appointment of the chairman of GECOM. The CCJ
because they said
violated the Constitution on the no confidence motion. All that is at your feet. Why are you blaming
Yes, well, it is because we carried it to the court. 2 Court of Appeal judges ruled in our favor in relation to some matters. So had we had just a Court of Appeal like we used to have before, it would have been the correct decision because we had nowhere else to go. It was a serious matter of law, and that is what happened. When you go to the Supreme Court in America, Salem, that is final, and whatever the finality about it, it is correct because it is final. And similarly, we have here, and that is what we're going to abide by.
You violated the Constitution. So why are you quarreling about something that you did?
We did not do that. What we did was a violation that occurred because of what the CCJ now is saying, that we have to have a duty to give reasons why we didn't like the 6.
So are you challenging the rulings of the CCJ?
No, we are not challenging it. I'm challenging the fact that at that point in time, we were unaware of the Constitution saying that we had
you weren't unaware. You know exactly what you were doing.
No, the Constitution did not say...
You took a man who was the advisor to the Attorney General on the government's payroll, brought him in the dark of night when nobody was expecting, and swore him in as a chairman of GECOM. That's what you and your government did to the people of this country. And as representative of the people, we challenged it in court all the way to the CCJ, and we won. And President Granger will be the only president so far in Guyana's history that will be on record as violating the Constitution. He is on record. His legacy.
I was there when Esther Pereira sued the former president in relation to a certain thing about ID cards, and it was held
a political agreement that your party that you were associated with now challenged. You ID card.
Right, exactly.
You should not speak about that, Kemraj. You should not be defending the PNC party. You are an independent party that is in a coalition. Or are you PNC? Are you defending the PNC bad faith approach for the Esther Pereira matter? You should tell the nation that.
Guys, you're very like, this is the energy we need to push Guyana forward. Guyana needs a lot of energy.
First time a president has been held. Well, what's wrong with Ralph Ramkaran?
Bishop, I wanted to ask you, knowing as you said, in the dark of night, in the dark of night, the president swore in Patterson as the chairman. Do you have trust that the GECOM, even with a neutral and impartial chairman, can they execute well on an election that is free?
Well, we have a problem right now. We have the chief elections officer in the dark of night has now produced an order that was signed by Mr. Patterson on the 11th of July before he demitted office, and he wants to use that order to start house-to-house registration this weekend, even before a decision by the new chairman. So GECOM staff, in the chief elections officer, is now under the spotlight to hurry up, pushing 9,000 or so people out into the fields to start a house-to-house exercise. So even if you get a chairman, it's a fait accompli. House-to-house registration started. So we must go on. We have already procured. We have already started. And that is the drumbeat of the PNC, supported by Mr. Ramjatan, who's leader of the AFC. And the people of Guyana are seeing it. Everybody is seeing it. The citizens of this country must demand that GECOM obeys the Constitution. GECOM is not above the Constitution. GECOM is a creature of the Constitution. And the CCJ ruled that GECOM must comply with the Constitution, which at this stage is elections in 90 days after June 18, which is September 18. So Mr. Ramjatan is hoping to create a constitutional crisis, make the country in pressure, and Barajagdio and his 31 MPs must go back to Parliament for the sake of peace and quiet and not having violence in Guyana. We must be the ones to go back to Parliament and give them an extension. Your caretaker government expiry date is September 18. And I want to say that to you, Mr. Ramjatan, and all the members of the APNU AFC. Your expiry date, read your bottle. Expiry date.
And who governs the country after that? One Edgel?
Well, you were hoping to put the doctrine of necessity.
Well, please,
you want to put the doctrine of necessity. You want to create a crisis.
That will be the doctrine. You asked for
it not apply. The final court of Guyana has already ruled. And like Mr. Ramkaran says, you have been the one spearheading that bullying and that intimidation, in particularly frightening PPP supporters to start putting pressure on their leaders. We don't want no problem in the country. We don't want no violence. So you but it will not happen this time.
Let me get Mr. Ramkaran the picture now. Mr. Ramkaran.
I want to let him know. You can't create a crisis and then claim necessity.
That's right.
Let me say that, Ralph, What you did and I did was to create what is called an argument that the court held. That in the situation, assuming the GECOM, that same GECOM that you want to have by 2 days' time, the chairman of the GECOM, were to say that it cannot be done. We have to purchase ink, we got to do this, we got to do a list that will have claims and objections and all of that. And the 18th of this, September, it does not happen. What happens, Ralph?
That chairman will tell us how many extra days he needs, maybe 5 or 6.
Oh, well, whatever. You are saying that on the 19th of September we did. It's a drop-down date.
No, I'm saying you expire. Your government expires.
So gentlemen, and
the caretaker status expires.
Gentlemen, so right now the APNU OAFC government is a caretaker government.
Yes, it is.
Can you guys explain to my audience, to our audience, to your audience, what is a caretaker government? What can they do and what can they not do? Mr. Ramkran, you can start.
Caretaker government, I wrote about this months ago. A caretaker government is a government of limited duration. That's the first thing. It usually arrives when a date for elections, when the parliament is dissolved and elections are called. In this case, it emerged when the no confidence motion was passed. The government and Mr. Ramjatan and the president said you can't find it in the constitution and all this kind of nonsense. And eventually the CCJ had to tell them, a convention that has been in existence for many, many decades. The CCJ had to advise them that the caretaker government exists. And as a matter of fact,
and I think we do accept the fact that the current administration is a caretaker. What can they do and what can they not do?
But they can't do anything major. They can't enter into major treaties. They can't enter into major contracts. They can't pass important laws. Those are the things they can't do. They have to keep protecting the country from external threats, from internal emergencies, and do the normal everyday activity that the government would do without major treaties, major contracts, major laws. That is what a caretaker government essentially is.
And I would suspect that one of their to-do list, the priority would be the election.
They have to hold elections. They have to conduct elections.
Yeah. Mr. Edgell, what is your take on the caretaker government?
Well, I subscribe seriously to the comments made by Senior Counsel Ramkaran on the status of the caretaker government, and I have had to write the Minister of Finance because he seems to be behaving like if it's normal times. He's getting ahead with preparing budget and giving people a date for budgeting sometime in November, and now he's wanting to form committees on the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which was illegally installed after the no confidence motion. What they cannot do, the cabinet cannot meet, the executive is resigned. And that is the important thing. Mr. Ramjatan, neither his government or president want to say that they have resigned. You know why? Because up until Tuesday, they violated the constitution by having a cabinet meeting. Mr. Ramjatan is sitting there, he must deny that.
I am not going to deny that, but
you're violating the Constitution. The Constitution says cabinet, including the president, has resigned. And in total violation of the Constitution, they're trying to fool young people and Rastafarians that they're bringing in new policy concerning the amount of marijuana if you're caught with. Bluffing, lying, deceiving. Doing cabinet outreaches, taking government to people, trying to hoodwink people, distribution of lands, fast-tracking applications that were there for how long before they failed, giving away waterfront property to friends and families and cronies and people who are strategically placed with inside information. All of that are illegalities. Engaging contracts with new oil companies coming into Guyana, they cannot do that. They cannot get into new loans, new grants, sign new treaties and all the rest of it. They are just a routine bunch of people who need to ensure safety, security, goods and services are provided in a normal way and waiting on an election.
And if I can ask you, what happens to the caretaker government after September 18?
They become a dictatorship. You no longer have a constitutional democracy. You no longer have a constitutional democracy if this caretaker government does not. They will be having a coup where they'll be seizing power without any constitutional cover. And Mr. Ramjatan should not be smiling, because there are thousands of Guyanese who are concerned about that same question, sir. And this government seems to think that if they push the PPP and the PPPC into a corner for the sake of peace and quiet, like what happened in the 1997 period, you will have 2 years cut off, the PPP will give up something, we will have to come to some accommodation and all the rest of it. The hardcore people who are desperately hanging on to power are pushing people like Mr. Ramjatan, who I understand would like to remain in government because he's now offered himself for a position and he's now seeing the writing on the wall, so he's holding on and he's going along with something that he knows that is not right, and that is not integrity. We need men of integrity that says, let's get this thing done. We've been on a charade long enough, bring this show to an end.
Minister Ramjatan, your government, as you have also accepted, is in a caretaker mode. What's the plan? What are you doing? How do you allay the fears? How do you allay the fears of the Guyanese populace that there will be an election and transition will happen? We're coming up to year end when businesses.
Well, I don't need to repeat it, Salim, please. We are waiting on the GECOM chairman's appointment for knowing when the date will be for elections to be held. Is
that your priority?
That is the priority right now.
An appointment.
Yeah, an appointment for the chairman. And it should be within 48, 72 hours, whatever. The next step is that indeed we are caretaker status, and to a large extent, Ralph agrees and Bishop Juan Edgel agrees. And I agree that indeed it is limited in relation to its expenditures, appointments, and policy making. That is what the Peter Hogg, and I have the textbook in my library here. As a matter of fact, I got it just in front of me. Peter Hogg's constitutional law that was quoted by the CCJ and Chancellor Yonette Cummings. We fully appreciate it and we will live with that. What it means, and this is where the bishop has gotten it wrong, because obviously he didn't read the decision in relation to the consequential orders.
Every clause in the decision I read, sir.
Whatever, you probably didn't understand it. They say that we are in a caretaker status now, but a caretaker government can have cabinet meetings. How
Which
do
part
you
of it
take
says
care
that the
of the
cabinet has
government?
resigned?
Please. How do you take care of the government if you do not have cabinet meetings? That is why the CCJ was so emphatic about that. We have entered a different quality and a different character of a government, namely caretaker status, and that means that all the trappings of it, cabinet meetings must go on. How could you take care of the government?
That's your Attorney General's advising the government.
That is mine, and that is also what this book talks about caretaker.
So the Constitution says the President and the Cabinet shall resign.
Cabinet cease to exist.
So those lines in the Constitution don't make sense anymore.
That Barrett Wagner is pushing in your head, you spewed all over the place.
So the Constitution says the President and the Cabinet shall resign.
Yes, and
are you prepared to obey that?
The government and the President remains in office until the swearing in. And I'm
the executive does not exist. You have to resign. Government is different from executive, comrade. You want to know that.
A government without being in the executive branch. This is not spiritual matters, you know. This is legal matters.
And Minister Kemraj, I want to ask
intelligence, Kemraj?
I am saying that you seem not to understand it. Please.
I would like to ask Minister Kemraj, I would like to ask you the same question I asked the bishop. After September 18th, if there is no election, what happens to your government, and what do you plan?
The government will remain in office in accordance with Article 106(7). 106 sub-article 7, it says it shall remain in government, ministers and the president will remain in government until such time as there is a swearing in. Okay? And
for 90 days.
Well, whatever it is, please, you want to ask the question? I am saying...
The AFC specializing in this, even in your press release.
Oh, my goodness.
Even in your press release, you're reading part in judgment and you're leaving out part to fool the guys.
Then will happen to the country. He says,
please let the minister answer.
Government in accordance with Hague's text, okay? The same textbook that we got here is saying that you cannot have government in a vacuum. It's the same problem we had in the Esther Pereira case. Because at that point, it was being argued that since the elections was a null and void elections, there is no government. And Justice Claudette Singh said, absolutely not. I want to hear, and of course, I brought in the doctrine of necessity. And just like how Ralph is saying that the convention of caretaker government come in, Ralph, I wish to tell you that the doctrine of necessity will come in after the 18th if we can't have any other thing. And you should appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, there's no point me continuing on this program because I cannot get in a war.
Okay, so
misleading his viewers. He's deliberately misleading viewers about the doctrine of necessity. He probably doesn't understand it.
So what happens after the 18th is come and gone?
Shut up.
What, UNOG will run the elections?
Shut up and listen to something.
No, but you don't want to say what will happen after the 19th of September.
You know,
right, so I'm just...
Mr. Chairman, you are allowing Mr. Ramjatan to bully everybody. Now, Mr. Ramjatan obviously does not know that you cannot create a necessity.
You said that and I rebutted that.
You rebutted it with what?
Please allow Mr.
Rebutted it with your mouth, with words? Where's your book?
Yes. Well, you will say that we will be de facto the government.
No, you will be an unlawful government.
Okay, well, fine. That is what you're saying. Well, we will see when the 18th comes.
So, Mr. Ramkaran, we've got about 8 minutes more until this show comes to an end. My question to you is, there's an overwhelming fear in Guyana that Granger is slowly becoming that dictator, that he is looking at various political instruments to ensure that he stays in power. Power is not taken away from him, willing to even rig the upcoming election. Is this something that we should be concerned about for the current president and the current administration?
Well, I don't want to focus on Mr. Granger and whether he's a dictator now. The country faces grave danger. And when I sit here and listen to Mr. Ramjatan blithely saying that he and his party and his government can ignore the Constitution.
Ramjatan never said that. Let me deny that right away.
Let's say that.
Please have Mr. Ramkaran finish his.
The Constitution says that the cabinet must resign upon the passing of a no confidence motion. Ignore that the cabinet says, that the Constitution says that elections must be held in 3 months. Say to the people who are listening here that his government can remain in office after September the 18th. Then this country faces great danger. And it faces the danger from people like Ramjatan. That's all I have to say.
Bishop, what's your thoughts? One commentator in the newspaper, Mr. Freddie Kissoon, said Guyana is in trouble. Do you agree with that?
I am afraid for Guyana, I must say. I am afraid for Guyana because of the mindset. You see those spurious, incredible arguments that came up in January. I don't know of another country in the world where a no confidence vote was challenged in a court. Mr. Ramjatan could probably cite some legal authority where a no confidence vote. A political action that was taken in the legislative hall and the legislative assembly. Men used the judicial system using spurious and incredible arguments of mathematics, including harming their own ministers because they already knew what the Constitution says about dual citizenship, just to hold on to power. You got 7 months. The CCJ has ruled definitively. And then you get a senior counsel who have written and asked who hired Mr. Marcus. There was no statutory meeting of GECOM that engaged senior counsel Marcus to represent GECOM at the CCJ. I've written publicly and asked who hired Mr. Marcus. And I've asked if it is the 3 PNC nominated commissioners. Silence. But Mr. Marcus goes, having been briefed by this government, we are in trouble. GECOM must be the scapegoat because we can't be ready. And he says, I want until Christmas Day, which is, you don't know, it's 2020 you're talking about, because nothing's going to happen during the Christmas period. The learned law lord said, a no confidence motion brings early elections. Regular elections are due in 2020, the first half of 2020. This Ramjatan cabal, this resigned caretaker government would like to hang on and create a crisis in Guyana until 2020, putting people's lives at risk just to preserve themselves, their benefits, while they continue to bring this country down. That makes me afraid of Guyana. And let me tell you why I'm also afraid. Because the people who used to be very loud have become calculatedly silent. The people who used to see and speak out have become willfully blind. The civil society actors that used to be hammering at the PPPC have all disappeared. Many of them have been bought with national awards and compromised by appointment to state boards. So they have now disappeared. And we are prepared to accept dictatorship and not following constitutional rule. And this is all grounded into some quiet whisper of why we should keep these people as against the others. And we're not allowing democracy to flourish. I'm afraid for Guyana. And I'm telling you, I know Mr. Ramjatan, and I'm worried that he's defending those positions.
Minister of National Security and former vanguard for against dictatorship. What can you tell the Guyanese population and the viewers tonight to allay fear of no rigged election and no descent into a dictatorship in the near future?
There will be absolutely no rigged elections. All that you just heard from the bishop there just now, prior to Charan Das vote the way he did, he used to feel that Guyana is the worst under the coalition government. That kind of talk that he just talked there, he used to say in 2017 and in 2018, prior to December 21st. Okay? So that is lovely propaganda and political speech. This country, because, by the way, GECOM is part of the Constitution. GECOM has its powers from the Constitution, and it is GECOM to call the day or the readiness for elections so that the president can then make the call for the date of the elections. And so everything that we are talking about here, there will be an appointment, there will then be a readiness statement, and the president is going to lay the date. Okay? And it will be far earlier than very many of you think there. Because a lot of people are saying that you're going to rig. You cannot rig elections in Guyana today because of the fact that you have scrutineers there, you have the international press, you have so many people.
18th.
What?
Will the date be before September the 18th?
I doubt it. I doubt it. Seriously doubt it. But that is my opinion, Salim, because of the fact that it will have to be a date that will be stated by the GECOM. I don't know if you don't like Ramjatan's opinion. Don't say that the elections will be rigged because Ramjatan is saying so. I have already made the argument for a more credible elections. We should have house to house. But if the GECOM man comes and say, well, I can do it before the 17th of December and on 18th of September, and I can declare the results there and so on. Well, fine. It is not for me to say what will happen with the new GECOM chairman, but assuming we do not want to break up our country, if when he comes in and he makes a statement that it must be days after or weeks after, all of a sudden You have the bishop and you have Ralph Ramkaran saying that we are illegal. It is not as if we're going to be illegal. Well, whatever you say, what then is the legal government of the day? Guyana will be without a government, right? That's what
you want to push the country
I am
to that.
saying, please, and Salim, if you could just listen me out, it becomes the de facto government. It becomes, by the doctrine of necessity, the de jure government. And for that purposes, the elections and everything else will be held until the swearing in of another president. And we must not do anything stupid or irresponsible to say that because they're illegal, this is what will happen on the streets and all of that. And if they want to go and do that, well, fine. There will be a response to that.
You said you have the security forces to deal with them.
No, I
He
said
went to Borbis and said that.
what the security forces? Well, that will be one of the instruments if you go and do unlawful things on the street.
And an unlawful government,
whatever it is, that's why we have doctrines. Ralph, isn't that why we lawyers come up with doctrines like the Convention of Caretaker and all of that?
You want to violate the Constitution and then claim
I'm not wanting to violate it, but assuming
show me
the GECOM chairman says no way on the 18th or on or before. What do we do?
What's the responsibility?
I should come back on the street and practice my law, and everybody, Ralph Karan and with Ralph Karan, and we should have no government, right?
When the GECOM chairman said, I can't do it, does the government have no responsibility? Does the government have no responsibility?
And the government has lots of responsibility.
Minister, do you believe that the government has the onus and has to own the timeline rather than have it be with GECOM and with lists and everything?
It has to be with GECOM because the government does not, under the Constitution, have powers of conducting an elections.
The president needs to name the date for election.
He's not going to talk about that, you know.
And make a proclamation, dissolve the parliament, and GECOM has to comply.
Conducts the elections, and we fought hard for that. Well, let the GECOM stay.
Well, guys, I really appreciate the time. We're almost done with this program. I just want to ask each of you one very simple question. You're all from 3 different parties. Of course, the ministers from a coalition. If I ask you if you're ready for election, you all will say yes. So I'm not even going to ask that question. I will ask you if there is one thing that you need to fix with your party so that you can have better result at the next election. What would that one thing be? And I want to start with Mr. Ramkaran.
Well, we're the smallest, we're the newest, and we have not campaigned before. So the one thing we need to fix is to get out on the street and begin our election campaign in public meetings and test the reaction to our policies. As you know, our policy is unique. We are saying we want a system of government that brings the 2 main political parties working under the same umbrella in a constitutional system that the country supports. That's our policy. We want winners. We want the PPP to win. We want APNO AFC to win. We want winners, and that is what we're fighting for. Eventually, if we have these 2 winners, the people of Guyana will win.
Bishop, what would be one thing you believe PPP should fix to have a better showing at the upcoming polls?
I think the PPP has been fixing what needs to be fixed. And I think one of the things that we need to really get out is this tendency in Guyana where people don't want to put the axe at the root. And I guess that's why my own style, if something is wrong, it is wrong. We have a lot of people who would like to sound reasonable. So rather than saying Granger is in violation of the Constitution, they prefer to say, you political parties need to work this out. They don't want to put the axe where it belongs. And I think the PPP needs to get its message out wider and in places where they did not get their message out before, because this election is not just about traditional supporters. This election is about Guyana's future and what we will do for all the people of Guyana. And I believe we are way ahead of fixing that. ensuring that in Georgetown, where we have moved from 2 seats to now 7 seats in the local government areas, and getting more Afro-Guyanese involved, reaching out to young people, and not just staying in our traditional base. And we have been fixing that, and I believe that is the reason why Mr. Ramchatan and his coalition don't want to face elections. There is one thing that the Granger-led administration don't want to hear about: elections. They are mortally afraid of the people and intelligent, educated electorate going to the ballot box, not being motivated by race, but policies and programs that will benefit them. The people of Guyana have had an opportunity to judge. The whole fad of newness of a coalition, they tinkered with it in 2015. The regrets are great, and people are ready to correct that and give the PPPC, the alliance of the People's Progressive Party and its civic and other partners, an opportunity to govern Guyana for the good of all the people.
And Minister Kemraj, what would be one thing you believe the coalition, or specifically the AFC, needs to fix to have a better showing at the poll?
I think it is promoting the major and minor accomplishments that we have done during the course of the last 4 years. There have been extraordinary things that have happened on all the ministries, all the departments of governments, and the deliveries of service in all regions and NDC areas. However, those have not been maximally promoted so that the people out there could see what has been done as against all that which was, done in a 23-year period, and do the comparisons. So it is important that we do that kind of promotion, marketing of these accomplishments and achievements, so that the wider society there can know that delivery of services was a huge thing that was done. Roads, bridges, the security sector, the decline in crime, the DNA lab, so many other things in security, infrastructure, the Wi-Fi, the hubs, info about the technology, telecommunications has been doing. So many other things within health and education. That, I believe, should be fixed. And then, of course, we're going to get lots more than what we will get. But what we will get, even at this stage, will mean that we're winning the elections.
Well, there you have it. We talked about election, whether Guyana is ready or not. I'm quite sure the political parties are ready, and others are ready. Some are not ready. But for sure, I think we've had a lively discussion today. Our viewership was really peaked, and I think the interest for a smooth transition from where we are today to election, to year end, and into the next year. I think every Guyanese are looking forward to that. Gentlemen, I want to thank you very much. It was a very lively, hot, heated debate, and that's what we need. If we're not debating issues, it means that we're not communicating, we're not talking to each other. So this is good. With that, again, I want to thank Mr. Nohar Singh, Devin, and Kumar from Globespan 24/7 for making this show possible every single week. And I'm quite sure you've been enjoying it, and I'm quite sure you will listen again next week at the same time, Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. as we bring another episode of this discussion. Thank you again, gentlemen, and do have a great evening, and have a great rest of your week. And we look forward to a chairman this weekend.
Thank you very much, Salim.
Good evening to all of our viewers. Thank you.
And if I made myself look like a bully to my two friends, please, I apologize.
You haven't succeeded in bullying me, Kemraj. That's very
I know I couldn't do that to you.
Great. Thank you.